Hi, Bob Record again. I have the privilege of being the Dean of Faculty for the Iron Forum Quest. I don't know whether you remember it or not, but a few years ago, actor Mel Gibson made a movie, and it was entitled, What Women Want. It was hilarious, great at the box office. But here's my question. As he dealt with a woman in his life and a 15-year-old daughter, does a man really know best what a woman wants or needs? Or is there a better idea, like having a woman address the issue? That's what we're doing today. What is it that the woman in your life really not only wants, but needs? Today, Cheryl Record, my wife for 46 years, having spoken across the country and in various other countries of the world, is going to address what is it that every woman and wife not only wants, but needs. You want to get your pen ready and poised to take great notes here because the payoffs can be awesome. So just sit back, grab that pen, have your paper ready, or at least be ready to put it in your iPad. And we're looking forward to a journey together in discovering what is it the women in our life really not only want, but need. Just watch.
It is great to be with you. I understand that having a lady in your sessions is not the norm, so I feel very privileged to be with you. You've heard the phrases, happy wife, happy life, or if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, or even the best thing a man can do for his kids is to love their mother well. Now, whenever I go to a teaching session or a seminar, I want to know what the purpose and value is there for me. So for those of you who just love the bottom line, I'll give it to you. Every high achiever understands that you don't just kind of win or you don't just sort of win. You got to do everything within you to win. Marriage is no different. Besides, don't we want to have fun as we celebrate being married? And sometimes we get that it just takes a few practical suggestions to take our relationships and our partnerships to a whole new level. And doesn't it just make sense? If you're going to spend time and money getting that vehicle tuned up every 6 to 12 months, and you're probably going to trade it in, doesn't it make sense to have a tune-up for your marriage once in a while? Well, over 4 decades ago, I knew I'd found him, my Prince Charming, the man of my dreams, and I couldn't wait to begin life together so we could be close, we could share everything, we would always be on the same page, and when we got to that wedding day, I just knew. I knew this was the beginning of an incredible romance, and Bob, like most men, saw this as a task accomplished, and he was now out to conquer the world. It didn't take us long to discover what every other married couple has discovered. Men and women are wired differently. It starts with simple things. Things like when a man goes to a restroom, it's a single focused task. When a woman goes, it can turn into a social migration with strangers. They'll often be best friends by the time they get back. Men are straightforward and blunt when they're frustrated. And they say so, or they say nothing at all by going into their cave. But a woman, if you say, honey, everything okay? She's likely to say everything is fine, which means nothing is fine. And if you say, let's talk about it, she'll say, I don't want to talk about it, which means she does want to talk about it, probably for hours. In communicating, we're also real different. Women, between their gestures, their words, and their sound, communicate about 20,000 times a day. A man, on the other hand, mutters a couple of thousand words, and with his gestures and his grunts like, really? Okay. It's about 7,000 communications a day, which means by the time he gets home from work, he's all talked out. Men are wired to accomplish tasks. Women relish relationship. That's why, to prove his love for her, he climbed the highest mountain, he swam the widest ocean, and he crossed the biggest desert, but she left him because he was never home. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Women are so complicated. I mean, they're so emotional. Men are just so much simpler. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Women don't have to be impossible to understand. In fact, your wife doesn't have to be impossible to understand. But here's the thing. For several years, psychologists and the neuroscience community tried to convince us that at our core, men's and women's brains were really pretty much the same, that the only thing that made us different in how we did things and perceived things was our culture and our influences around us, how we were raised. Well, did you know that according to a Stanford study, new technologies have generated a growing pile of evidence that there are inherent differences in the way men's and women's brains are wired and how they work. In fact, you can see those differences by the time an infant is 2 to 3 months old. And those differences really start even earlier. As we've studied, we've found that baby boys developing normally in the womb about halfway through pregnancy have this major testosterone wash and surge that influences not just body parts, not just their body proportion, but it also changes their brains. That was corroborated just this past spring in a World News report, which said when using MRI scans of unborn babies, it was discovered that the neural connections that were in various parts of the fetal brain and in baby girl brains were merely absent in a boy brain. What does that mean? Well, there are scientific reasons why. A man's brain is more compartmentalized. Bob says it's boxes, and frankly, he tells me his favorite box is his nothing box. But for a woman, everything is interconnected. It's also why women tend to be more verbal than men. But don't you think the scientific community could have saved themselves just a whole lot of time if they'd have just taken a look at Genesis 1:27, where it says God created people in his own image. He patterned them after himself, male and female, he created them. And later on in 2:15, we're told the Lord placed Adam in the garden to tend and care for it. In other words, God called and hardwired a man to accomplish a task. And in that perfect garden, before sin, with an intimate relationship with his heavenly Father and a purposeful task to do, God still said to him, "It is not good for a man to be alone. You need a suitable helper." That's why God in Genesis 2:22 tells us he fashioned Eve, a perfect companion that he brought to Adam, a woman designed for relationship with her man. Well-known author and pastor Chuck Swindoll says it this way: your marriage will turn a vital corner when you realize it is the Lord who personally prepared your mate for you. So if it was the Lord who prepared her, doesn't it just stand to reason that her differences are his gift to you? Ephesians 5:25 and 26 reminds us, and you husbands must love your wives with the same love that Christ showed the church. He gave his life up for her to make her holy and clean. So we see in these verses that a husband is called to be a transformational leader. But all through God's kingdom, we learn this: leadership is always done through servanthood. So what does servanthood mean here? It means setting aside your own agenda, your own thoughts, your own expectations of how she should think, how she should feel, how she should respond, to discovering how she does think, how she does feel, and how she does respond. And if you will take the time to discover the hidden questions in just about every woman's, but especially every married woman's heart, you're going to be light years ahead in your relationship. So what are those questions? Well, number one, believe it or not, no matter how much you've told her, in a woman's heart is this question: do you still love me? Do you still love me? Would you still choose me? Oh, I know you've told her probably a lot. I sure hope you're not like the guy who said, "I told her I loved her the day we got married. I'll let her know if I ever take it back." That need to know is hardwired into her. It's why Ephesians 5:25 is a command. Husbands, love your wife. It is enhanced by what is said in Ephesians 4:29. Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So beyond just telling her that you love her, what says you love her to your wife? How do you love her in the way that she needs to be loved? Well, what drives that question? You see, underneath all of us are specific kinds of needs, and for women, one of the core needs is that she feels secure, because the woman's greatest fear is insecurity. Now, I'll bet you're thinking that means I need to make more money, or maybe I need to buy more insurance, or maybe even set up a better retirement fund. And while those are good, and while those are important, what is vital for your wife to feel secure are about 5 things. She needs to feel that she is a priority in your life and that you demonstrate it by how you spend time with her. She feels like that you're an active player in the team at home. She feels like the two of you are close. She's convinced that you are all in. And lastly, she's convinced that you're working hard to provide as long as it doesn't crowd out the first four. We said that her biggest fear is insecurity, so what can threaten that? Sometimes really, really simple things. Remember we talked about those boxes in a man's brain? Well, let's just say something's not going quite right at work. Maybe you've had a major challenge in your company and you're trying to figure it out. For a man, oftentimes that means going into his cave, being a little bit more remote, being quiet, not talking about it. Sometimes you think you're doing her a favor. But let me tell you what's going on in your wife. Most of the women I know that when their husband becomes remote and quiet assume it's because they're either angry, upset, or disinterested in them. And that causes a huge insecurity for her. It just happens. Can't explain it, it just does. So what's your best action point here? Well, when you're walking through that stuff, pull her aside and say, baby, I am just walking through some business stuff. I'm needing some space to figure it out, but I want you to know we are okay. Did you know that 95% of women, when they were surveyed, said if their husband took time to do that, it would alleviate a tremendous amount of tension for her? I remember when Bob went through a time like that. And I remember what I felt like. I was unnerved. I was wondering what was going on. Maybe we just hit that place where he really wasn't that interested. And I finally, after about the 5th or 6th day of saying, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? He finally said, do you really want to know? Right now, I feel like nothing I'm doing is working. I kind of feel like a failure, and I just don't know what to do. Now, for you guys, you're probably thinking, really? You really said that to her? You were that vulnerable? Let me tell you what I felt, and when I've shared this at marriage conferences, most of the women are right there with me. Oh, honey, I feel so close. You've told me something. You've shared your heart with me. But you see, your wife has another question in her heart. Is what's important to me important to you? And at the core of this is her wanting you to value and understand her emotions. So how does that play out in real life? Well, when your wife comes to you and she shares something that maybe upset her, it concerned her, did you know she's not primarily looking for a solution? Let me say it again. She's not primarily looking for a solution. For a woman, how she feels about a problem is as important as the problem herself. And women generally process by talking things out. Many of the wives that I've talked to say, well, when I'm upset, here's my husband's advice. He says, you just need to get over it. Or maybe he says, you just can't let them get to you. Or just stop thinking about it. If you offer that kind of advice, you may walk away from that conversation feeling a little bit like this. Remember those differences in men's and women's brains? While it might help your buddy to tell him not to think about it or get over it, our brains are not compartmentalized. Our brains are wired so that we think about just about everything all at the same time. Think of our brains as like about on your computer having 150 files open all at the same time and all on shared space. So if we have an argument, we're going to be thinking about it all the time, somewhere in part of our brain. And I'm going to give you just a little simple advice that may save you some really frustrating hours of hearing at the end your wife saying, you never listen to me. For a woman, listening is often the solution. Active listening, not with remote in hand, not while you're doing a few texts and emails, but turning toward her, leaning toward her, looking right in her eyes. And then after hearing what she has said, saying, baby, I want to make sure I heard what you said, and repeat it back to her. Let her clarify if you didn't quite get it. And then say, but more importantly, I want to understand what you mean by that. And again, let her clarify. Only after that, maybe you could say something like, is there anything you feel like you should do about this? See, that's demonstrating your affirmation that she's probably already thought of a solution. Again, she's processing with you. And you could even say something like, look, are you really wanting to just vent with me right now? Or do you care or want my thoughts about this? and give her the opportunity to tell you what she's looking for. The reality, you may never have to offer a solution. It takes a whole lot of pressure off you. And for your wife, she thinks you're amazing as a husband and as a listener. But there will come those times. Those dreaded words that most men seem to hate to hear. She's going to say, honey, we need to talk. Now, if I'm guessing, for many men, that's when their defenses go up, because what men tell me is when their wives say something like that, they're thinking, okay, now what did I screw up? How'd I mess up now? This is where I have good news for you. Remember, I said for a woman, talking helps her process. So it could be something simple like she's concerned about one of the kids. She's noticed something in the bills that needs to be addressed. She's wanting to talk about vacation, and she wants to process it with you. But if your defenses go up because you assume it means a screw up on your part, you may hear her say something like, I just feel so alone in all of this. And that's too often when a conversation, if you're not happy with her, is going to degenerate into you saying, what do you mean alone? I'm out there every day working hard for this family. So if she does bring up something that you need to address or that she's concerned about, and she may say something like, I was devastated when. You really hurt me when. Well, let me tell you what not to say. How about not say, well, that's just dumb. Or how about, I can't believe you'd say that. Or even, I just wish you'd see it from my point of view. It's a really great time to review in your head some things out of 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous, nor boastful, proud, or rude. Love does not demand its own way. Love is not irritable and keeps no record of when it's been wrong. It's never glad about injustice, but rejoices whenever truth runs out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. So, you want to be her hero? Try something like this. Honey, I never want you to feel that way. Why don't you share with me things I might do so you never do? That would be an amazing demonstration of servant leadership. And then after listening, you can clarify. I want to make sure I heard what you just said, understood what you meant. Frankly, when we did that a few times, I remember Bob taking out pencil and paper to write down what he said so he would never forget it. John Gray, author of Men Are From Venus, Women Are From Mars, says it this way. When a man can listen to his wife's feelings or a woman's feelings without getting angry and frustrated, he gives her a wonderful gift. He makes it safe for her to express herself. So the more she's able to express herself, the more she feels heard and understood, the more she's able to give the man the loving trust, acceptance, appreciation, admiration, approval, and encouragement that he needs. Have you ever noticed we live in an incredibly sexualized world? I mean, look at any ad focused on men, and what are you going to find? An absolutely knockout, beautiful woman, perfect hair, perfect teeth, makeup all done up. She is fantastic. And if that's not bad enough, we start our little girls and give them this to play with. Here she is. If you know that Barbie was a real woman, she'd be 5'9". She'd have a 39-inch bust, an 18-inch waist, 33-inch hips, a size 3 shoe, and weigh 110 pounds. In fact, one of the first editions of Barbie was called Slumber Party Barbie. She came with a How to Lose Weight book, and the only words written in it were, don't eat. How does the average American woman, who's 5'4" tall, weighing 166 pounds, even begin to compete? But compete we try to do. Because in every woman's magazine that you will pick up, with maybe the exception of ones in December, you're going to find a diet and exercise plan sure to make us thin in about 2 weeks. So men would be wise to understand that there's another question burning inside of the heart of their wives, and that question is this: do you think I'm beautiful? Do you think I'm beautiful? We need to hear you say it a lot. Like every time we make the effort to put on makeup and do our hair and put some nice clothes on, or even maybe when the babies turn 4 and we're still wearing stretch yoga pants because we can't seem to take off the baby weight, or we've noticed those 1st or 50th or whatever number of gray hairs on our head. If you wait only to tell us when we're all dolled up, going someplace special, you're missing a great opportunity to make your wife feel more confident and fall in love with you all over again. Because we know, we get it, that men are visual, that our looks are important to you. And listen, it isn't just some women that need it. It's all women, even if she's accomplished, even if she's successful, and even if everybody else thinks she's knockout beautiful. Because inside, every woman is this little girl that's still standing there in her swishy dress saying, "Do you think I'm pretty?" And she does this primarily for you, to look good for you. So here's some words that will never cut it. "Oh yeah, it's fine. Yeah, you look okay. I told you last time you wore that. It was okay." Listen, is that how you want somebody to describe your business? "Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, he does a fine job. I think it's okay." And when she asks, "Well, do these pants make me look fat?" she's waiting again for you to tell her. This is not the time to go into comedian mode and say, "No, it's your thighs that make you look fat." To a guy, that'll be funny. To a woman, it will never be funny. In fact, I read a blog recently where a guy for his anniversary wrote in lipstick on her makeup mirror, "Baby, you are still the most beautiful woman to me." Did you know 6 months later it was still there? Because she could not bear to wipe it off. That's why when Bob and I do marriage conferences, one of the first things we do is have husbands and wives stand up, hold each other's hands, and we say to the guy, look straight in her eye and tell her you still think she's beautiful. And he does. Now, it sounds canned and corny, doesn't it? Except that every woman there just about starts to cry. And she begins to hug the stuffing out of her man because it is that important. Don't just tell her when you want sex. It's going to make those words lose their impact. She's going to think that's the only reason you're saying it. Just tell her often. But there's a sobering statistic to keep in mind, and I want to tell you about its effect. We know that about 5 out of 10 men in the church, 5 out of every 10, struggle at some level with pornography. And if your wife discovers that you're into that or going to strip clubs or something like that, it is devastating to her. Why? Well, simply this. Because in her mind, the message is, you'll never be enough. You can't measure up to the woman that's up here in my brain. It's going to kill her confidence as a woman and probably her trust in you. So take some time, go back, think about those things that you said to her when she was falling in love with you. "Baby, you rock my world." Or maybe you used to put your hand on the small of her back as you walked in a room whispering in her ear, "I'm so proud to be seen with you." Your words have so much power. So whatever you were saying back then, say it now. Find great new ways to say it. It's simple, but it's so powerful. Now, if there's one thing I know, you got a company, you are a busy guy. The demands keep piling on. Being successful is going to require a balancing act of skill, creativity, hard work, patience, persistence, and sometimes just plain luck. In addition, just about the time your business is at its busiest, it's the time when home is busy too. Kids with lots of activities, getting ready to save for their college or sending them off. Maybe your parents are needing extra help. Listen, life is just busy. And as we've said before, men are just hardwired to feel this inner demand to provide, and not just to provide, but to provide well. Add this thing called technology, and people have access to you 24 hours a day. Now, you're doing this for your wife, you're doing it for your family, no question. But sometimes we can get into these talks and these arguments, and suddenly you may hear from your wife, "You're never home. You're never home." Why do I know that? I was that wife. I can remember for 20 to 25 plus years of our marriage, that seemed to be the central argument that we would have. Maybe some of our problems stem from different backgrounds. My dad was home and involved with a lot of stuff, even though he had about 5 businesses. Bob's dad, on the other hand, dysfunctional background, and he thought the best way to show his love was to just work really hard and be gone. Most of us don't arrive in our marriages without at least a few challenges, but we are going to have to be intentional if we're overcoming it, or just hoping that it happens will not make it happen. And you're probably, like Bob was, wired to be an achiever. You want to set the world on fire. So here's a good time for a review. Remember those 5 things that we said were necessary for a woman to feel secure, for a woman to understand how valuable she is to you? I'm not going to read them all, but look at number 5. She is convinced you're working hard to provide as long as it doesn't crowd out feeling close, feeling like a priority, feeling like you're an active player, feeling like she's convinced that you're all in. So to accomplish that sometimes means taking a good hard look at how life is being lived out. I learned how to stop saying, "You're never home," and start saying, "I don't think you realize how important you are here, how much we miss you when you're not a part of what we do." Bob dropped defensiveness and began to ask us questions. How can I make this better for you? How can I make it better for the kids? Our oldest son weighed in at one point saying, Dad, I can't explain it, but somehow if you are out of town and you're away more than 8 nights a month, there's just something at home that happens. I can't explain, but it's just not right. We need to see you in your chair. With that advice in mind, we began to be more proactive, looking for the times in the calendars where we knew that maybe Bob would be exceptionally busy or the kids would be exceptionally busy, but afterwards might be some downtime that we could focus in on having family time or focused couple time. In addition, Bob invited me to be part of his planning team. I would come with family calendar in hand, and the most important dates of our family were always put on that calendar first. At the time, it was our youngest daughter was a cheerleader, so getting those dates on there, times that we would get away. And I even had veto power. Now you're going to think he's crazy. You're going to think, oh my gosh, how did that go for you? Did he ever do anything again? Well, let me tell you what happened inside of me. Suddenly, I felt like I was part of his team. I felt like I was a valued player, and I began to be far more aware of just how many demands he faced every single day. At the end of it, actually, I felt a whole lot more respectful of what it took to run something. But what I'm going to tell you next might come as a shock to you or even just a pleasant surprise. Did you know that for most women, in fact 7 of 10 women, say they would far rather live with less and have their man home more than to have him work hard and never see him? They said it like this: they'd choose financial struggles over struggles from insecurity or lack of closeness in their relationship. One wife put it this way: I hope my man doesn't think I'm so shallow that I would prefer stuff over him. If that's true, how do you let her know she's special? How do you let her know that you love her without breaking the bank? Well, it's going to take sometimes moving out of work box and going into home box even during the day. Maybe you're going to set some reminders on your phone just to get you to do it. Send her a text. Maybe you had a great victory at work. Maybe you had something small that took place. Maybe you were just thinking about her. Let her know. She's going to feel more a part of your day. Bring her home a favorite treat, something simple. Bob brings me home once in a while a little Chick-fil-A ice cream because it's one of my favorites. Put some handwritten romantic notes around her makeup mirror with Post-it notes. A single rose on her pillow when you leave in the morning, or a romantic card for no reason. You get the idea, but remember this: gifts and gestures don't have to be expensive to feel extravagant to her. Let me say it again. Gifts and gestures don't have to be expensive to feel really extravagant to her. So as we wind this down, I know I'm talking to a group of men, so I'm going to dare say it. Most of you, or at least a whole bunch of you, are probably thinking, so if I put all these suggestions and principles into practice, will our sex life get better? And my answer to you is probably. Why? Because for a woman, sex starts right here, in her heart. That's why the more she feels loved by you, the more she feels like you're concerned about the core needs of the family, the more she feels like you value her emotions and who she is, the more likely she's able to really feel like she can respond. But just like everything else, there's a few principles that deal with our differences that go here too. Because while a woman's greatest need is for security and her fear is insecurity, for a man it's adequacy. And his fear is inadequacy. That's why Viagra commercials work. I don't have to even explain that to you. Most men are driven by a desire to feel desired by their wives. And if she doesn't seem to desire him in the same way he desires her, he can maybe come to the assumption that he's not adequate or he's just not that attractive, and it can make him angry. So here's some things to keep in mind. Women in general, and I'm saying in general, there are exceptions, but women in general have a lower sex drive than men. That same testosterone wash that took place back when you were in your mother's womb, that's still there. It profoundly affects a man's sex drive. And let's face it, we've all heard the joke about the 2 teenage boys, and the one teenage boy says, have you seen the study that says teenage boys think about sex every 30 seconds, and the other one looks at him and says, what do they think about the other 29 seconds? Have you ever heard that joke referring to a teenage girl? And just because we're married, it doesn't change. We're affected all through the month by our hormones, and it can change how we feel. So if she doesn't initiate as often as you'd like her to, it may have nothing to do with you. Number 2, it takes a woman longer to ramp up, but once she's ramped up, she's raring to go, except for this one other thing. You remember that brain that is all interconnected and nothing gets let go? I mean, your wife is probably a great multitasker, right? Well, the babies cry, wondering if the kids are going to barge in, hearing her cell phone ringing, sitting there thinking, did I really turn off the stove? All that stuff can get in the way. This is where you can help her by precluding some of that. Help her with the chores. Make sure you know the oven has been turned off. Maybe you're going to check in on the baby for her before anything goes on. One enterprising dad we knew who was very creative, he kind of would laugh about the story that when he wanted to slip off with his wife, he would do a pretty elaborate scavenger hunt in their fenced-in backyard with money and change that kept his kids busy for about an hour. The point is, get creative, get proactive, don't be defensive. Give her anticipation time. Maybe you're going to do that by just letting her know during the day that you desire her. Shower, shave, use cologne, stay fit. Tell her it's important that it's great for her and ask her how that can be better. If she says no, don't take it personally and don't assume it's rejection. Sometimes things have gone on, but if no has become a habit outside the bedroom, ask her why. Ask her that you want to know what that might mean. Keep this in mind, according to the CDC, and this may be a deeper reason for her. According to the CDC, 1 in 5 women, 1 in 5 have been raped. 1 in 4 have been molested. Her lack of interest may have nothing to do with you, but if you love her, make sure she gets the help she needs. Here's the bottom line. For women, sex begins in the kitchen, not the bedroom. Her interest in sex is affected by how you leave her in the morning and how you come home at night. Her desire for you is enhanced by how well you listen. So as we wind this up, remember the questions your wife is asking. Do you still love me? Is what's important to me important to you? Do you still think I'm beautiful? The question for you is this: will you learn how to love and listen her well? The key things about all these principles comes down to this. They're all simple. They're just not easy. Leading a business takes work. Having a happy wife takes just as much work. Now, the ball is in your court.